Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I think we'll start now. First of all, I think we'll start the introductions, please. I'll start off by saying I'm County Councillor Penny Jones, and I'm Chair of the Children and Young People's Select Committee.
And I'm Councillor Peter Farley, Chepstow St Mary's Ward, and I'm the Vice Chair of this committee.
Hazel Eilert, the Scrutiny Manager.
Sarah King, Democratic Services.
Jacqueline Richards, Service Manager for Monmouthshire and Torvine Youth Offending Service.
Tracy Giles, Head of Children's Services.
Ian Saunders, Head of Tourism, Leisure and Culture.
And I'm Mike Moran from the Leisure Services section.
Colin Robertshaw, Parent Governor Representative for Monmouth Comprehensive School.
Mike Fowler, Parent Representative, Governor Representative.
Councillor Maureen Powell, Councillor for Castle Ward Abergavenny and a member of this committee.
Councillor Roger Harris, Councillor for Cresson Ward in Abergavenny and a member of this committee.
Linda Guppy, Councillor for Roggett Ward and a member of this committee.
Good afternoon. Liz Hackett-Payne, Cabinet Member for Education.
Martin Hickman, County Councillor for Glen Forest and a member of this committee.
Good afternoon. David Jones, Member for the Grecorney Ward and a member of this committee.
Good afternoon. Richard Austin, Principal Officer Inclusion, CYP.
Good afternoon. Andrew Evans, Management Accountant for CYP.
Tyrone Stokes, Finance Manager for Social Care and Health.
Sarah McGuinness, Chief Officer, Children and Young People.
Claire Marchant, Chief Officer, Social Care and Health.
Thank you, and I think Nikki Wellington has just come in, the Finance Manager. Well, as I say, thank you all for coming. It's an additional meeting and there's quite an extra workload today, so I think we'll start off as soon as we can. First of all, we'll have apologies for absence, please.
County Councillors Clark and Howarth. And Mr Plough.
Are there any declarations of interest? Shall we say as and
when, Chair.
All right, thank you. Next, we have to confirm the minutes of the previous meeting. As it's a fairly heavy agenda, shall we just say, are there any items, any matters arising that anyone wants to bring up before I just say we'll confirm? For either meeting, either on the 17th of September or the special on the 21st of October. Well, can I take them as read then, please? Thank you, Maureen, and seconded by Roger. Thank you very much. Right. First on the main agenda is agenda item 5, which is Play Opportunities Review. And this will be presented by Ian Saunders, who is the... what are you? Sorry, Ian, you have just... I'll explain first, sorry. He's Head of Tourism, Leisure and Culture, and he has taken the place of the author, who's Matthew Lewis, because he has had an accident. So we wish him well, and we'll hand over to Ian, who's going to tell us about the purpose of this report is to consider the Place Efficiency Action Plan for 15-16 and to inform members of the proposed timetable for the review of the Place Efficiency Assessment. The first review was undertaken in 2013, and we haven't had it back to Select since then. Thank you, Ian.
Thank you and good afternoon. And firstly, Matthew is not a serious accident, but obviously he's probably sitting at home watching this now, so I hope I can do his paper justice. The Play Opportunities Review was very much needed as part of the wider agenda of play across Monmouthshire County Council. And when we're talking about play, it's play both closed and open. And I think when we reflect on what play is in its purest sense when we were children and thinking back to childhood about play opportunities across the borough, sometimes we look at the options we've got inside certainly the play schemes that we currently operate in the leisure centres as very closed access and very monitored, very safe, which is appropriate. But maybe sometimes we need to consider a more rounded and more open access. So the purpose of this paper is just to go through some of the options, some of the issues that are facing the service, in particular leisure, in delivering the current play schemes as they sit. And then Mike Moran will talk through the play sufficiency assessment and our statutory obligations to do such an assessment for the authority. So we had an independent, well, there was a couple of issues here. The Local Service Board commissioned a review of our current play provision, our play scheme offer in the leisure centres. And there's several issues around the sustainability and the way that we deliver that scheme as we go forward. Not only has regulatory framework changed from Welsh Government and the Care Social Services Inspectorate Wales, which has really upped the level of qualifications needed to provide such a scheme, meaning that you know, the reliance on leisure to make sure that those qualifications are in place has been very difficult. We've had problems recruiting adequate levels, and in the inspection we had in this current year has although we've done safe and provided a good scheme, there have been some issues that I think going forward we're just not going to be able to overcome. So I think that's the first thing that we need to consider. Secondly, there has been some differences in the way that disability and access for children with disabilities have been put forward. It's not an equal setting. It's certainly not equitable access for all our children. So that's another issue. And also the issue of how much extra responsibility and how much extra time this takes to deliver what is a 4-week scheme. And it is a 4-week scheme that's very much centred around childcare provision and not play provision. So again, leisure centres being looked at as vehicles of generating income, looking at opportunities to develop the sporting offer. The leisure centres and the leisure services for a majority of the time are taking a lot of their time to deliver what is an excellent scheme, but it is a childcare scheme for 4 weeks of the year. So there are the review, Torfaen Play Service completed the review, and they have put some options forward for discussion. So possibly that's where I'll stop and take questions, if that's okay, Chair.
Yes, that's fine, Ian. Would you like to, are you able to just go through the options briefly? I know that, I think we picked up that option 4 is the preferable one. Is that fair to say?
I think option 4 is the most balanced and the one that provides both options of the leisure centres continuing to provide a provision, sport camps and activities, and then to do a community community-based play scheme activities with volunteers, well-trained staff, and a provision which provides equal access across the authority.
Has anybody any questions at this stage? Councillor Guppy?
Just further looking at option 4, you've highlighted the fact that a lot of the play schemes are being dual used in view of childcare, but that is essential when the 6-week school break for families to go to work. There's nothing in the report that would give substantial evidence of how this problem would be overcome for the families. I just want you to comment on that, because I think that should be within the option about how exactly to get round this problem. And it's not a problem. People do have to work. You know, there are life changes, and I don't think many people work term times only.
I think that's a good point, and I think there's possibly other avenues where childcare provision, you know, it could be undertaken. You know, it's a fine balance, isn't it, between providing a scheme that gives play and opportunities. There'll be a scheme possibly be a scheme if option 4 is the preferred model, which provides a scheme which is not regulated, but children can go to a leisure centre for the period of time that currently, because of the regulations on childcare provision, we will struggle to provide at the leisure centres in the future. So there'll still be a model for parents to drop children off and do sport, or sport and physical activity. The potential for them not to do a play scheme which is regulated, you know, is a different model. And one on cost alone is becoming not sustainable. So I understand what you're saying, but I think it's something that we're really going to have to review and try and find a solution for parents. There will still be a model that children can be dropped off at leisure centres, but it won't be child care, should we say. It'll be sports provision.
Back on that,
Yeah,
Councillor
just
Guppy.
that perhaps we need further information upon that needs to go hand in hand with this report. And, further, maybe we need further consultation exactly where else childcare could be used. Is there enough, places? What have we looked at other childcare providers? There are many other sort of similar play schemes that happen maybe for a week at a time with different venues. I know the churches and sort of local clubs do that, but I think we're going to have a major problem if we pull out of and apply option 4. And I don't know. There's no easy answer. I can see what your predicament is, but I really feel as though that we've got to sort of look at what else, if this is stopping, what else can families do to maintain their employment.
Councillor Fowler, I think, sorry, Mr. Fowler, I think, just promote you. I think you want to come in on this particular option 4, don't you?
Yeah, two things. Before we get too far into it, I just wonder if, for those of us who are less educated about this kind of thing, if you would define what open and closed look like, because to be fair, I don't know what that looks like. And then if you want to say that, I'll then come back with something about option 4 as well.
Okay, closed access is where parents drop their children off at a certain time, in this case 9 o'clock in the morning, and they're cared for until 3:30 in the afternoon. And the children don't really have an option. They're kept within the building and undertake a range of activities. It might be sporting activities, arts and crafts, games, visits by statutory services, etc. Open access is basically what it says. It's open access. Children have the choice to leave if they turn up to a session. The sessions tend to be quite a bit shorter, so that they're not regulated by the CSSIW. And that means that they can't last any more than 2 hours per session. It's usually free access for children, so children don't usually pay for that. And that really is the difference. I mean, there are differences in the way that the actual play is organised, but I won't go into those sorts of details. But open access play is meant to be about the child leading the activity and staff supporting it, rather than staff providing a fully themed scheme throughout a 4-week period.
Okay, so as a parent of an 8-year-old, then that sounds scary to know that my 8-year-old could wander off if I'm not there because we've left them in your care. That just sounds scary in itself. And as a council and our safeguarding, I don't know how well that sits. But then looking at other things, you say it's free of charge. Well, looking at the previous schemes that we've had that we're looking to cease, the admission charge funds probably at least half of the cost of running the schemes. Now, to my mind, that seems like a jolly big hole in finance in a climate when money is tight.
When I said it was free to attend, it doesn't have to be free to attend, but a lot of open access play sessions are free. We have the option to charge. And as far as your 8-year-old wandering off goes, and I have an 8-year-old too, so I would have the same concerns. There is obviously a register and a note taken of the children that are there with contact details. Parents usually drop those children off to the sessions. And if a child was going to leave, we would obviously contact the parent of that child before they wandered off into the blue yonder, as it were, really. So they would be contacted and given the opportunity to come and collect their child.
Yes, Ian, would you like to come in?
Yeah, I'd just like to say Torvine have been successfully running these open access schemes for a considerable number of years, and with their experience and the way they've run it, clearly if we were looking at the option to do more open access play, we would be taking guidance from some of the existing schemes that have run very successfully in neighbouring authorities. Just to reassure you, it wouldn't be a definite safeguarding measures in place and all the necessary, because obviously that's, you know, we're mindful of that situation.
Right. Just to my mind then, as Linda was already saying, it sounds a far cry from what we're currently offering, and you say that that's unsustainable, but it sounds like we're making a heady retreat and running for the hills with this option.
We're certainly not doing that. I mean, the team, the leisure services have worked tirelessly to do the schemes over the last years. We are getting to a stage now with safe recruitment, CSSIW reports, qualifications. It is not sustainable in its current model. You know, and that's we leisure services put an awful lot of time into doing this, and probably there's another 50 to 60,000 pounds worth of time alone of officers that's not even inside the funding that, you know, comes across from town and community councils. We get money from Families First as well to do this. All of it is you know, under threat. I would imagine funding is not guaranteed from the town and community councils. Yeah, the way that the money is being spent from Welsh Government, from Families First, is also under review. So we need to be very clear here about sustainability, just from a time aspect, but also on the practicalities of delivering the scheme that CSSIW are expecting going forward. And I said they did, you know, they did inspect us this year, and there was considerable conversations with officers about the scheme. And if we run a scheme in 2016 that doesn't comply to their levels, that we would be closed. We would be running a scheme that, you know, if inspected, could not, you know, reach those levels. So that's just something to put into the discussion.
Councillor Harris, would you like to come in now?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. First of all, just a general statement. I've got in front of me an agenda that says 256 pages long, and there's masses and masses and masses of details here, and it's written so that absolutely everything that could be said and we should know is down there. But there's nothing that I can see from a responsible officer writing a report as to what they really would like us to be looking at. You know, we've got the lot, but you're the ones, if you like. I'm not talking about officers in here specifically. I'm just talking about generally. You're the ones that are writing the report, and you really must be writing them in such a way that you should be flagging up what problems there are or what's going well, and it's a plea basically to say, let's have the report, let's have everything, but let's have a separate sheet with why you've written the report, what you think is important there, and where you think we should be particularly looking. So that's just a plea on that one. Looking at the key issues, I suppose the bottom line is we're obviously needed to change for various reasons, but basically how much money, if you like, will we be saving by implementing either options 1 to 5? In other words, is it a money saving option as well as some of the recommendations that CSSIW want us to do?
No, it's not. It's definitely not a money-saving exercise, because there is no budget for this at the moment. It is, we rely very heavily on the town and community councils to give grants to us to run, and we also take the income from the scheme. And the scheme, you know, I think sometimes breaks even, sometimes we make a small amount, but bear in mind leisure centres then put in all the time and the partnership and all the facilities and the administration. So I guess, you know, the reasons we're doing this are for what has been mentioned about the CSSIW, the access to disability families, which has got to be more equal. And I guess the third one, and it is third on the list, is the bit about leisure centres being focused on delivering what leisure centres are, are there to generally designed for sport and physical activity, although they are community centres as well. So take on board, the fact that we run play schemes at the moment, but in their current model, they're not sustainable. So I take on board what you've said, also about the report. The whole process now is a big consultation exercise with parents from the disability side of it. We've talked to the children's services, and also obviously the town and community councils that we have. I think we have gone. I was at Chepstow last night, and we've been to all four of the towns. We've got to speak to the community councils. A massive engagement process now as we go forward.
So just going back, is the inference then that if the town and community councils pulled out, we as a local authority would just pull out lock, stock and barrel? I think we'd still offer something at the leisure centres, but we wouldn't be able to afford to do a play scheme or child minding scheme in its current model.
Thank you. Councillor Farley, I think you want to bring something up.
And can I make an observation, then ask some questions? I'm particularly pleased to see how well the Bulwark scheme comes out in this, in all sorts of ways, and yet it doesn't seem to have been considered as a model for the way forward elsewhere. And that is a truly community-based effort, and is very much a tribute to the town council and to the community centre in Bulwark. But my questions, I think, is it fair to say, I think it is fair to say, we're actually being slightly misled here. There's a trigger to this report which is not mentioned in it, and I think it's unfortunate that it is not mentioned. Clearly there have been some adverse comments, inspection reports from CSSIW, which is part of the driver for this change in the service model, but they're not mentioned. Now, have I got that wrong?
I don't think they're adverse. It's comments from the inspector about how we've managed the scheme over the years, and going forward, they are. This is how it is going to be. There's going to be no room for us to not go through the various things that we need to implement to run the scheme.
Okay, so we haven't had an unacknowledged adverse report, but some helpful comments have been made which are being used to guide this. So yes, okay, well, I'll thank you. I'm grateful for that, and I'll apologise for suggesting something was being hidden. Two more questions, really. Torvine clearly have a play service and were perfectly capable of writing a report on ours, but we don't seem to have a play service. Could we? Should we?
I would say we should have a play service. However, we used to have 2 play development officers. We used to have a play bus that used to go out to rural communities. So over the years, I guess with funding cuts and everything else that we've gone through, those officers are no longer in post. So currently Mike Moran and Matthew Lewis is trying to head up play. We've got a play sort of group that meets to discuss play, and people like Tim Bradfield and Tracy Thomas sit on that group, but we haven't got any specific officer dedicated to play for Monmouthshire.
Thank you, and I'm sure those reasons are understandable, and I would want to acknowledge the efforts of the people that you've mentioned in order to keep this work going, but it is a matter of priorities, and clearly the neighbouring authority took a different view on where the priority lies, and as far as play is concerned, that is one of the consequences of where we are now. Final question. Option 4 particularly, as we've already acknowledged, is dependent on paid and volunteer staff. So I think it's a crucial point now to hear how the safeguarding issues will be addressed, not just to acknowledge them, but how will they be addressed as far as particularly the volunteers are concerned. That will worry members. This committee receives regular reports on safeguarding, and it would be very disappointing if, one area comes good, but another area suddenly takes us backwards.
I think what we should do is, if it's okay with you, Chair, is to come back with that proposal and a more detailed plan of what that would actually look like.
Yeah, yes, Mr. Saunders, I think that's a good idea. Actually, I'd like to welcome the two visitors at the back. I presume, would you like to introduce yourselves? I think we can all hear if you'd like to. I think you're from CSSIW, is that correct?
Yes, I'm Anne Ferris from CSSIW.
Hello. And would you like to make a comment on anything that has been said or participate? You don't have to, but I'm just offering you the opportunity.
I mean, I think just generally the only comment that we would want to make is we recognise that there are difficulties and that it's very difficult when we're looking at changing regulations, albeit that they're absolutely necessary. So we acknowledge that, and I guess it's up to the authority to make some decisions about how you move that forward, or in which way is best for your authority.
Thank you very much. Okay. Any other questions? Yes, sorry, Councillor Powell, you've been waiting patiently.
Yes, it was, because it's a long time since I was involved with very small children. What age, what's the youngest age that they come to these 5? So it's not, you're not having the ones that are actually nursery school children, you're having school children. Thank you, that's what I was concerned about when you were saying the worry about them being looked after. I know they need looking after a lot longer than 5, but I was thinking about the smaller ones. Thank you very much.
Sorry, Councillor House, would you like to go in?
Yeah, it's just on the final point on option 4, which is potential risks. I just want to get this one nailed down. One of the potential risks is, will financial contributors still support if it's a different model of delivery? And I want to just nail down what happens if they don't support it.
I think if it's very positive when you go out to town and community councils, that the message is very positive, and the fact that obviously they're well appreciated in the towns and they're respected in their current format. I think it's a conversation we've had with the town councils, and they would want us to go back again as part of the dialogue to see if it's something that they are keen to continue to support. I believe that when we get more clarification on the model of what the community groups and community venues would be like, I think that's when probably that conversation will be more of a positive one, because when they can actually see examples of what's happening in some areas of Torvine, I think the Bulwark scheme is a good example of how that could easily relate back to a model that would be really quite for our communities in Monmouthshire. But your question about funding, I guess it's one of those that if that did happen, we'd have to significantly decrease the provision across. But it might be that one town council does want to back a scheme and one doesn't. So again, that would be difficult.
Is that all right? I'd just like to point out something. Colleague Gwent do childcare scheme courses, and they do level 3, which is 17 to 18-year-olds. And I was just wondering if they were ever asked to be volunteers, especially in the summer play schemes, because it's an integral part of their course that they do work experience, but also they are reliable and they've usually been had DBS checks, etc. So I was wondering does that happen?
I think we do recruit far and wide and have conversations with different partners, and the youth service itself have got certain staff trained to deliver some aspects of it. But our colleagues in CSSIW as well would understand the difficulties we are having with upskilling a lot of should we say employees that they're coming back from university or they're coming back from different places of work for 4 weeks of the year for this scheme is quite problematic. And that's not not to say that we can get around it by looking at different people in different organisations to help us with that.
I was thinking in particular the early years, courses, so they would have experience with young children. It was just an idea, that was all.
Could I just
Yes,
comment?
Councillor Guppy.
It depends where the course, their DBS is carried out, because Monmouthshire would want their own, and that's always been the policy, which that would create further issues, although not an expense if it's voluntary, though. However, but it's still you need them in time, don't you?
Has anybody any other questions at this stage? No, then I think. Sorry, can I help, or do you want to make a comment, Mr. Wren?
Just about the place efficiency.
Sorry, in fact, at this stage, I must be honest, I was rather muddled about this. To note, for instance, a recommendation to note the proposed timetable for the review of the place efficiency assessment and the intention to report the draft results of the place efficiency assessment and action plan for 16-17. I don't think any of us are quite clear, so perhaps it will help clarify the situation. Thank you, Mr. Wren.
Thank you, Chair. About 3 years ago, well, exactly 3 years ago, we carried out the first place efficiency audit in Monmouthshire. That was a quite wide-ranging review that involved consultation with parents, with children's groups, town and community councils and elected members. Since then, the Welsh Government have made play a statutory responsibility of local authorities. One of the problems with that is that there is no funding that comes with that responsibility. And as Ian alluded to earlier on, the council doesn't have any dedicated play staff. So it is going to be difficult, but not impossible, to produce a place efficiency audit, because what we're charged with doing is assessing whether or not we have sufficient play opportunities in Monmouthshire for Monmouthshire residents. And as you can probably tell from the discussions earlier today, there were differences of opinion about what sufficiency is. And sufficiency isn't defined anywhere in legislation. So it looks at a broad range of play provision, right from fixed play equipment, open access play, closed access play, play in parks. It actually also includes sports development. So it's quite a wide-ranging review. And it's a very defined timescale that we've got in which to carry out the review and produce a report. But we're pretty confident we can do that, Chair. And what this report is alerting members to is that process will be going on between now and when we report back to Cabinet in early 2016. There is a fairly detailed process that will be taking place. And that will involve probably most of the departments of the authority. And as I say, every elected member and every town and community council, voluntary play settings, etc., will all be consulted for their views on the sufficiency of play opportunities in Monmouthshire.
Thank you. Can we just request at this stage that proposal and plan comes back to scrutiny, perhaps prior to going to Cabinet, if that's possible?
Yes, I'm sure we'll be able to solve that.
Right,
in
thank
the
you. The other thing is, I'd just like to suggest to the committee that we ask that the delivery model, the future delivery model for staff play provision report comes back to us at a later stage. Would you agree with that, Mr. Saunders, that for with safeguarding, etc., more detailed? Does everybody agree with that? Then that is my recommendation that we will arrange a date and a time, and perhaps the audit action plan can also come back prior to going to Cabinet. But I'd like to thank you both for coming today and giving us this report, especially for being so last minute with Matthew off sick. But thank you both for your report. Okay, thank you. Right, the next item on the agenda. Could like to come down and please the officers concerned and sit in the front. Thank you. Tyrone what?
Stokes.
Right, I'll just introduce, thank you, gentlemen. I'll just introduce the next agenda item 6, and it's a Revenue and Capital Monitoring 2015-16, month 6, outturn forecast statements. I think, Nikki, are you the finance manager, Nikki Wellington, are you going to introduce this, or Tyrone Stokes?
Tyrone's going to go first.
All right, Tyrone, you all right? We'll let you get on with it. We know that it's the second period, month 6, isn't it? Thank you.
Myself and Nicky Neal are here just to present the month 6 forecast outturn for Children and Young People Select. If look at the report there is for your information and consideration, but if I draw your attention to section 2, and the overall outturn at month 6 for the authority is just over £1 million overspend. And if I look at what makes that up in terms of children's services, after reserve funding, children's services is exhibiting a £1.18 million overspend at month 6. Section 3.1.11 shows the various contributors to the overspend. But if I just look at some of the main contributors to that, the external placement budget within children's services is forecasting an overspend of £823,000 and is supporting 64 placements at month 6. And the continued use of agency staff has a net cost to the bottom line of £326,000. At month 6, the budget was supporting 121 looked after children, and at the beginning of the year that was just over 100. So in the last 6 months, we have seen an increase of 20 looked after children come into the budget and the service, and that has a direct impact on the bottom line. There are no capital schemes or budget mandates for consideration within children's services, but within the budget there are areas of improvement. Some of those areas are within the younger person's accommodation budget, which is continuing an underspend, which is good news. We've sought to reduce contact costs within the division by establishing an in-house service, and that's sought to reduce the costs within this area. And the Gwent Wide Integrated Community Equipment Store, we've looked to realign the cost base along the partnership, and that's continuing an underspend through the financial year, and it looks like we can hopefully continue that within future years. Thanks very much. If you've got any questions, I'm happy to take them now, or if you would like Nikki to do the educational element, and then we'll take any questions after. I'm happy to take them as you see fit.
Can I just ask a social services question? Would that be more valid at this point? Right, where of the cash injection into social services, the children's services? Sorry, yeah.
Yeah, as part of the budget, yeah.
As part of the budget.
For this year, we have had a cash injection.
Yes, a cash injection. So how is that working out? Is it bringing the budget back into line?
Unfortunately not. We had an extra £900,000 with the budget bill for this year, plus we had an additional cash injection of 400,000. That was when LAC numbers were at 100, but they're now at 121, which has had a significant impact on areas such as the external placement budget. So unfortunately, no, it hasn't sought to realign the budget.
No, I did note that you just said that it had gone up by 20, the numbers had gone up by 20, which is considerable from the cost point of view, isn't it? So
yeah, we've got an increase of, was it 20? We've got a 20% increase in LAC numbers. If we look at the average unit cost of a LAC child is about £50,000 a year. So if you take those additional 20 times by the 50,000, you come back to the £1 million. So the math there is about the additional demand that came in after we sought to go to council for the additional cash injection, which has hit on the bottom line for this financial year.
Councillor Harris.
Thank you, Chair. On the looked after children, is there anything peculiar to this county that the numbers have gone up, or is it a sort of general trend across Wales?
We've done a comparator exercise across the other local authorities. It's hard to look at other local authorities because each local authority is unique. They've got some of them have got in-house services they can rely on, some haven't. In terms of operational basis, it might be one that Tracy can better answer than myself. Thanks. Thanks, Tracy.
I'm in constant contact with Gwent and the rest of Wales about the looked after population, and we've got a clear steer from Welsh Government to reduce our looked after numbers. What we're finding here is that the numbers are going up at the moment. They have actually come down since this report has been written a little bit, don't get, only a few. But it's variable across Wales, and every time we speak to different parts of Wales, it's gone up and it's gone down. What we are seeing is that the complexity of those coming in is really significant, and it's quite rare to have a young person needing secure accommodation, for example, but we have had a couple of those in the past couple of years that are very high cost, and not only are they high cost when they're insecure, they obviously need quite a significant, detailed, tailored package when we then move them away from secure and on into other options for care, because sometimes they're able to go home, but it's not very common that they go from secure straight home. There's lots of things we have to do in the meantime. So it's not just about the numbers of looked after children. We have what we're seeing is real complex needs from the child, or sometimes more recently we've had particular cases where the perpetrators of the abuse, we can't say from immediate assessment with the police. Going back a few years, you would quite often see it was either one or the other, and you could therefore safeguard that child very effectively by the removal of the house from the house of the perpetrator. But now we're seeing that both potential perpetrators, so we have to do different things, and we look for family members obviously in the first instance, but obviously that's not always acceptable, and we can't safeguard a child, in which case we would need to bring them in. So it's quite a varying picture around Wales.
Tracy. Any other questions to Tyrone? Right, Nikki, can we ask you to do?
Okay, the Directorate was overspent by £197,000. This is an improvement on the Q1 results of £77,000. Included in that would have been our redundancy costs for the teaching and non-teaching staff as at the end of August. The budget was of £300,000 was fully spent, and the total costs that have come in to date of 456,000, of which the difference the schools are picking up. We have held back a small contingency of 20,000, which was agreed with schools, so that if there are any redundancies going forward between now and the end of March, that will go towards helping for those costs. If I go through the main overspends with the Directorate, the individual schools' budget is over by 28,000. Some of that will relate to, or the majority of that relates to protection of employment for staff that have moved into jobs that are paid slightly less than they were currently paid, and they get protected for a number of years. Pleased to say that ALN was actually under by 102,000 as a result of additional recoupment income. Youth service, as you're aware of, was subject to a £200,000 mandate at the beginning of the year. They have found 63 of that, so of our savings, we're still reporting that they are looking for 137, although since this report's been written, that has improved again. The final one I was just going to raise was breakfast clubs, and again, that's reporting an overspend of 55,000. Again, that's due to an increase in numbers, which has resulted, obviously, in staffing increases and food costs. Do you want to discuss this first and then we move on to schools? Shall I take questions on this one first? Or shall I move straight on to schools? Okay, on schools. We have a surplus budget at the end of the year of 683,000. 6 schools are in a deficit position. the one school, the one additional school is Overmonnow School up in Monmouth that's gone into, to be fair, an £8,000 deficit, which is a small deficit for the size of the school. I'm currently working with that school to do a recovery plan. The reason for that deficit was that the school actually had increase in pupil numbers and therefore had to employ an additional teacher. So therefore they don't get extra funding for it. The funding will come in next year, provided those pupils stay enrolled. Chepstow School it's still in a deficit position. Unfortunately, their deficit has increased at Q2. However, reviewing that with the school, they are confident at the moment that they will be able to bring that increase, that they'll be able to recover still within the 3-year time frame of that recovery plan. That is something that Mark and I are going out to meet the school early December to discuss.
Councillor Harris.
Thank you, Chair. Regarding the school budgets, you say there's 650,000, something like that. But you also mentioned that schools have had to pick up about 150,000 in redundancy costs. Presumably, has that been taken into account on that 650,000? Yep. Okay. Thanks.
Any other questions? Councillor Farley.
A couple of questions on 3.2.5, Nikki. I mean, it's the same area that we're already talking about. A fluctuating trend, you say. So what does that mean? That some schools have got an answer to the problem of the kind of programme they need to manage, or are there other circumstances? Because you say it is of concern that some schools are showing a continuing reduction, but clearly others are coming in as more balanced. So what's behind that?
I think 3.2.5 relates directly to the table below, which is looking at the total school balances. So we are actually seeing school balances overall increase. There are schools that are in a deficit, 6, as I've mentioned. The majority of those schools, well, all of the schools have a recovery plan, and the majority are meeting that recovery plan. I've mentioned Chepstow as the exception at the moment. We are seeing overall the recovery plans are working, and that we are seeing a reduction in the balances. We will always get, certainly this time of the year, the likes of Overmonnow or other schools that have slipped into a deficit purely on the fact that they've had to employ pupil numbers, so, you know, in a teacher for pupil numbers. We don't give them top-up funding for that. So I'm confident that we'll probably be down to about 5 again by the end of the year in a deficit.
Thank you. The second question is 3.2.6. The intriguing final sentence there. Members may wish to seek a comfort that balances aren't being used to subsidise and sustain core costs such as staffing, which I can only interpret as meaning they haven't got sufficient budget to meet their core costs and staffing and are therefore being forced to use their reserves. Is that right?
Yes, and their grants. Obviously, schools are subject to a lot of grants, and I think that was the concern that this table was showing, that the balances are going up, but we have seen a fluctuation. And we did do an exercise actually looking at the core costs compared to the funding of the schools. And yes, they are using their surpluses to employ staff. However, again, you'll be aware that we're doing a formula change at the moment, which will shift more of our money into staffing costs and away from general allowances and things like that. No extra money, but just a movement in.
So you could, I think, do I read you then as saying, in effect, this is partly a transitional phenomenon that hopefully will change over time?
I think schools will always use staff core funding to use the balances to subsidise staff. If you have a surplus balance, we would be expecting you to use that surplus balance on your children that are in school. The majority of the spend is staffing, so therefore I would always expect schools to be using their funding on staffing.
I would agree with you, which makes that sentence I drew attention to slightly odd, because that's actually something, the comfort is actually that they are being sensible and doing it.
Yes.
No further questions,
Yeah.
Chair.
I note that the formula change is coming to scrutiny in the next one. Yes, so thank you. So we'll have more of an update then, won't we, on the situation. So thank you. At this point, I think perhaps I'd like to introduce Claire Marchant, who's the new Chief Officer for Social Services. And I just wondered if we could ask you a question, just to carry on where we asked Tyrone. I know you've only been here, for the purpose of everybody watching, for 9 days, so it's just to ask about your awareness. And it's about the reasons, we are aware of the budget for children's services, and we are aware that there are more lack numbers, etc. But how do you plan to mitigate the increase in costs, and will you be looking for future for more monies?
Thank you very much, Chair, and it's nice to be here. I think I said that the last time. I think, as Tyrone has said, there's two critical issues which are underpinning the current budget position in children's services. One of those is the increase in looked after children, which we've talked about. The other of those is the use of agency workforce within the children's services because of issues around sickness, absence, recruitment, etc. What we need to do, in my view, around the children's services is to put a financial plan around it, which make sure that we've got a sustainable budget going forward, and that will be my advice going forward. And we put that plan together on a 3-year basis. The additional investment that was approved last November, the benefits from that were never due to come in yet. They were due to come in starting next year, but over a 5-year period when you look at the business cases and when full benefits were expected to be realised. Obviously, since then, the baseline has changed, so that those business cases were put together at a time when I think the number of looked after children were 100. As at the month 6 position, they'd gone up to 121. As Tracy has said, the position has improved very, very slightly, but it's such a variable position that we need to make sure that we're projecting forward as best we can with all the caveats and risks around that in as robust a way that we can, so that the budget which is put forward and recommended to Council is what we need sustainably going forward. We need to be robust in terms of realising the benefits from those business cases and contain and have a budget settlement which contains those pressures going forward. And that would be my advice. And we've started that work in earnest.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? Mr. Fowler.
Hi, this is a really, really easy one. No, I promise it is. Having sat down to read all 256 pages for this meeting today, it comes to looking at all the many tables of green and some red and brackets and minus, and it's just a plea that we could have something somewhere near the start that just tells us which is which when we're looking at these numbers, just so we can pick them apart. Green is good, red is good.
Yeah, we'll take that back. The report, we feed into the report, but our central colleagues write it, so I'll actually get them to put a key at the top for you.
And just to add to that, I'll just point out, I'm sure everybody on the paper copies, that there was one page that was printed over, so it was undecipherable.
Sorry, if I just add to that, this was raised at the last meeting. I think it was yourself, Councillor Harris, that mentioned about meeting with Mark Outcroft around the structure of the report. Looking at the key, if I just draw your attention to 3.1.11, the 5th column across, movement since period 2, the key is there for that element, mentioned about red is an adverse, green in brackets is a favourable, so that gives you sort of a flavour around the key on it. But I take your point, it is hidden in it, but there is some sort of key. But again, I will take it back to Mark. I think when I took it back to Mark last time, he did enter into an email correspondence with Councillor Farley around the structure of the report.
I think it's to do with the traffic lights as well and things like that. It's all that. Yeah, thank you. Councillor Harris.
Yeah, nice simple one. Basically, you two senior officers sitting there. Is there anything in here that is causing you worries? I know we're at the situation we are at the moment. Come the end of the financial year, is there anything that you should be letting us know that you've got grave concerns about?
I think from my point of view, certainly with it in terms of the central CYP, nothing that I don't think we can control, if I'm perfectly honest. Obviously, ALM, we mention that all the time, volatile area, but that will... I think with the schools, yes, the significant deficit in one of our secondary schools, and that needs to be very closely monitored. I have to say that would be, if we've got a risk, that would be the risk for me.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry, go on.
Sorry.
I think just to finish Councillor Harris's question, in terms of children's services, is just to echo the words of Claire, is around sustainability within the budget, and is the increased demand with the looked after children numbers coming into the system, and is the shifting of the base budget. That's my concern. And also is around just taking one point further that Tracy mentioned. If you look at the detail of the current looked after children numbers we're supporting, is the mix of those. So that's my concern as well, because, for example, LAC numbers could stabilise, but spend could still go up. For example, if you look at unit cost, in-house fostering is maybe 20,000 a year. But if we looked at a residential out-of-county placement, it could be as much as 250,000 a year. So that's the concerns. Is the devil's in the detail with children's services. And if we look at the service, if we look at the surface, it may look at 121 looked after children, but is a lot more intrinsic and complicated behind that, is trying to unpick that and portray that across as well in a financial report. Sometimes is difficult, and that's the concern from my point of view, is trying to get that sustainable budget, and it may not be a palatable answer we can give you on that, unfortunately.
All right. Any more questions? Oh, yes, sorry. Councillor Hickman, followed by Councillor Jones.
No, just indicating.
Right, thank you. I
Councillor
was just following
Hickman
on from Councillor Harris. I mean, what we should be worried about maybe is the looked after children. 20% rise is worrying, especially at 50 grand a year. I mean, there's $1 million there. I wonder how you can have a clear steer to cut those numbers. I mean, do you relax your rules a bit, or how can that be?
If I can just take you forward on a financial viewpoint, and again is picking up on another point that Claire mentioned. With the looked after numbers, what I've done for Claire and Tracy over the past couple of days is look to project numbers based on historic trends. And if you look at those, it's putting forward a sustainable 3-year plan, and is looking at those in conjunction with the business cases, with the delayed realisation of the savings. And I think we just have to consider that that baseline budget is going to need to be realigned in order to account, one, for the LAC numbers, and then moving forward within a certain degree of numbers, we might be able to mitigate with the future realisation of the business cases.
Claire, would you like to come in on this?
Yeah, just briefly, because this will need to come back for further scrutiny, I'm sure, but in terms of the 3-year plan that we're putting together, it's got to be a service and financial plan rather than just a financial plan. And we've got to look at the whole system in terms of children's services. We've got to make sure that we've got the right range of services in place for children perhaps who are on the edge of care. What interventions are evidence-based that could be put in place at that stage? What interventions for those who are on the verge of becoming a child in need can be put in place? Where are our current resources tied up in terms of early intervention and prevention? It's absolutely critical that we get a stable workforce in place. There's recruitment ongoing at the moment. If you know any social workers who want to come and work in Monmouthshire, please tell them it's a fantastic place to work, because that's absolutely fundamental, is making sure we move away from reliance on agency and we've got the right workforce in place, because it's got to be driven by practice, and that's what authorities who've been in this position and moved out of it have done. It is making sure that we're tight around our thresholds, but critically that those services are in place that offer evidence-based alternatives, and that's the nature of the plan that we'll bring back. It's looking at the finances in context of where the service needs to go.
Thank you. Tracy, would you like to come in?
Yeah, just to say that in children's services, looked after children is not our first point point of call. We look at every opportunity to make sure those children don't come into care. However, there's been quite an increasing number, for example, for mother and baby placements where the baby cannot be safeguarded, and we need to assess that. And that is a period of 12 weeks where that mother and baby is assessed by us in a couple of options placement-wise before we take any decisions around how that child will be looked after and what those plans will be. And equally, every child who is already looked after by Monmouthshire County Council, we have policies and procedures in place to constantly review any looked after child. Because they've come into the care system does not mean that they will be in the care system until they're an adult. We look at different ways. Sometimes we've had foster carers who've wanted to take out a special guardianship order, and we've had quite a few recently. So we're not, I just want to reassure committee that we, at every opportunity, if there's a request for increased funding, we don't just start paying that funding, we assess that need. We have a meeting with the organisation or the foster carers to make sure that the needs are met. We do, you know, we can't relax what we do. There are thresholds around safeguarding these children, but just to reassure you, we do have procedures in place to look at on a case-by-case basis, particularly those really high-cost placements that cause a lot of my social workers quite a lot of anxiety because they know the bill that is going along with these placements, but in the meantime, they are still having to safeguard those children.
Thank you, Tracy. All right, Councillor Hickman. Any other questions? I'd just like to thank you for Nikki and Tyrone for your reports today. Again, you know, clear and concise and related where necessary to CYP directly. It's very good. It'll be interesting to note how the recovery plans are taking on shape and the results of those when you come back next time. So thank you very much. I'd like to introduce agenda item 7, which is a Youth Offending Service Inspection Report. And the purpose of this report is to advise CYP Select of the outcome of the inspection of youth offending work in Monmouthshire and Torvine. It will be presented by Jacqueline Richards, who I think we're welcoming to the Select for the first time, and the who is the Youth Offending Service Manager. So Jacqueline, I'll hand over to you and we'll ask questions after, if that's all right.
Thank you. We've brought this report to Select today to provide you with an opportunity to scrutinise the inspection report that was completed in June of this year and to highlight any concerns that you might have in relation to the performance of the Youth Offending Service in achieving our outcomes for children and young people. So Monmouthshire and Torvine Youth Offending Service are a partnership organisation. Our statutory partners are an Iron Bevan University Health Board, the National Probation Service, Heatherley Gwent Police, and then Torvine County Borough Council and Monmouthshire County Council, hosted by Monmouthshire County Council. The primary purpose of the Youth Offending Service is to prevent offending and reoffending by children and young people. The inspection was conducted by HMIP, Her Majesty's Inspectorate of Probation, in June of this year. And it was there was 3 days of fieldwork inspection with the Youth Offending Service, and they looked at 14 cases in detail. The focus of the inspection is on the quality of work completed at the start of the order through to the point where plans are put in place for that young person following sentence. And the reason that they focus upon that specific area of work is because it's deemed to be critical in terms of the positive outcomes for children and young people following sentence. It was positive that the HMIP found that our performance was consistent with the findings from the previous inspection in 2010, which was a fairly positive report, which only identified that moderate improvements were required across the areas inspected. The inspection looks at a number of key areas, including reducing reoffending, protecting the public, protecting the child or young person, and ensuring that the sentence is served. And then there's also a commentary towards the end in relation to operational management. So there are a number of key areas of strength identified within the report, including the quality of advice given to the courts in relation to pre-sentence reports for children and young people, the engagement of children and young people and parents in those assessments. And they also noted that priority was being given to addressing compliance and non-engagement issues. In terms of areas for development highlighted by HMIP, they highlighted the need for all assessments and plans to be informed by an analysis of relevant issues. And I think it's fair to say that we have a group of case managers within the Youth Offending Service who are highly skilled, who have varying experiences within youth justice. And I think what we need to focus on is ensuring that the skills, knowledge and experience of those more experienced youth justice practitioners filters through to the less experienced members of staff within the team. HMIP also noted that reviews needed to reflect any significant changes in the circumstances of children and young people. Again, I think just to put some further context around that, we are required to update our assessments, or case managers are required to update their assessments whenever there is any significant change in circumstances in the life of a child or young person with whom we work. Now, a lot of the young people that we work with do live very chaotic lives, and so that could mean updating that assessment on a weekly basis. HMIP also noted that we needed to ensure that the evidence of the impact on quality of management oversight of cases was better recorded on the case management system. So I think they acknowledged that that there was evidence of management oversight of cases, but that it wasn't always clearly recorded on the case management system. I have also highlighted within the report, although there aren't any resource implications in relation to the inspection report itself, I thought it was important to make you aware of our current financial position, in that we have had a £50,000 reduction in contribution from one of our statutory partners, and we have also had a 7.6% reduction in our youth justice grant from last year, and a further in-year reduction of 10.6%. I don't think that's actually within the report because we hadn't received confirmation of that at the time, but it has now actually been confirmed, and it is 10.6%. I'm happy to take any questions.
Jacqueline, would you like to refer to the action plan? Just briefly, because
Yes,
have you got a copy there? We know that some has already been done, hasn't it? Been carried out, some of the work. So
Yes,
some
yes.
of the recommendations, if you just explain that.
Yes,
Thank you.
so into the creating a good practice library, that was around trying to ensure that the good quality work of the more experienced staff is shared with the less experienced staff. I think sometimes we talk about what good quality work looks like, but actually we don't provide enough examples of good quality work. So we have created that good practice library so that staff can see what we consider to be good quality work. We have the operational managers in the Youth Offending Service are now overseeing all of the planning meetings, and that was around ensuring that the diversity issues that are identified within assessments are followed through into the intervention planning. And we have reviewed and updated our case recording policy to ensure that managers are evidencing their management oversight of cases and any management decisions. There are a number of actions that are in the pipeline. I think one of the biggest ones for us is that in April of next year, we will be going live with a new assessment tool for the Youth Offending Service. That's a national assessment tool, and we've just started our implementation phase this week, actually. That will involve a lot of training. It will be resource intensive for the staff at the OSS because they have to do that alongside continuing with their day job. But I think the positive that that will bring is that it will mean that all staff are at a level playing field, because all staff will receive that training at the same time.
Thank you very much, Jacqueline. Well, my question was going to be that are there any staffing implications associated with the need for more in-depth reporting or overseeing of reporting? You know, are there staff shortages, for instance? Or is it just a training issue, which you're obviously addressing as part of your action plan?
It's a training issue. We have a few vacancies within the service at the moment, but that's not in relation to case manager vacancies. That's specific specialist posts. So we have all our social work case manager posts are filled at the moment.
Anybody got any questions? Councillor Farley first, and then Councillor Harris.
Thank you. Just for background, can you remind me? Obviously, there's a reduction in funding from the Youth Justice Board. Where is the Youth Justice Board? Is it in Whitehall or is it in Cardiff? I'm just thinking of to whom our MP will need to write letters of complaint about, possible reductions in services.
It's the Youth Justice Board Wales, but it's the same position for England as well.
So it's Mr. Gove.
Harris?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, looking at section 3.5 and just needing positive assurance on that. Assessments throughout the 14 cases were not of significant quality. Reviews in changes in the circumstances of children and young people, 3 out of 9, and not being done well enough. And if you look further down, the staff are saying that they think the management is good, and the line manager has skills and knowledge to help them develop and improve. But however, HMIP noted that the management oversight of cases was not regularly evidenced in case files and not being delivered, and had not delivered the required quality in all cases. So management, obviously, were falling down there. You can assure us now that they've taken on board the problems that are highlighted there, and because if they're not looking at what their juniors are doing and doing regular checks, then they're not doing the juniors any good, let alone the people that are doing reports on.
Yeah, I think that is a fair comment to make. What I would say, is, and I think it is referenced within the inspection report completed by HMIP, was that the case sample was actually taken from a period when we did have staffing vacancies, specifically in the management team. So I would expect that had they looked at a case sample prior to that or after that, that I would hope that the results would be better. But the management team have certainly taken on board the recommendations and welcomed the recommendations from HMIP, and will take that forward to ensure improvement.
Can I just come back in there?
Yes,
It's
yes,
the sort of
Catherine.
thing, we've got the report, but if that had been mentioned in there, I wouldn't have asked the question, if you know what I mean. And it's that little additional bits that I guess are so helpful to us.
Yes, Tracy, would you like to comment?
It is quite difficult for staff when they're writing reports for members to try and cover everything that we think you may be asking. And I think we like to keep the overview reports a bit shorter for you because we're mindful of the hundreds of pages that we're asking you to read. And actually, sometimes it's better if we're able to have the discussion so that we can clarify those things, because there was an actual reason behind that kind of perceived gap, which I think is helpful to discuss during the committee.
So you prefer us to ask questions?
I do.
Yeah, okay.
And that's going to be my famous last words.
See, you asked for it. Right, Councillor Hickman.
Thank you, Chair. I was just going to ask about falling budgets, and I'm sure the workload's increasing. How's that going to impact the ongoing, please?
I think when you say that workload is increasing, I wouldn't necessarily say that workload is increasing. I think that there's been a shift in the workload. So we have had a significant reduction in the number of first-time entrants through to the system. We've had a significant reduction in the number of children and young people who are appearing through the court system. But there has been a significant increase in the work that we're doing at the front end in order to achieve that reduction. So I think we do need to look at our position, and we are currently looking at our position for next year. But I wouldn't necessarily say that there's been an increase in the workload.
Okay, thank you. What I meant is, I'm sure it's not decreasing, but obviously the money is. I just wonder how that's going to impact on the whole sort of system, really.
If we have further reductions in the next financial year, then we will need to consider a restructure, and that's what we're looking at the moment.
Thank you. Any more questions? I'd like to thank you on behalf of the committee, Jacqueline. That was a very clear, concise report, and I hope it wasn't too onerous for you. The key strengths identified by the Inspectorate were noted, alongside their recommendations and areas for development that they identified. So we also note that a post-inspection improvement plan has been drawn up and has started to be carried out and implemented. But we request that you perhaps return to Select with that plan and to tell us where you are and how you are in 6 to 9 months' time, if that's all right, just to demonstrate how the plan has been achieved against the recommendations, if that's all right. Okay, thank you very much, and thank you, Tracy and Claire. Right, well, ploughing through, so we now got to agenda item 8, and this is the annual complaints, comments and compliments report for Children's Social Services. If you'd like to come and sit down, Annette. And the purpose of this annual report is to note the contents of regarding information on the number and types of complaints, comments and compliments received between April 14 and March 15 about Children's Social Services. The report will be presented by Annette Evans, the Customer Relations Manager. So Annette, if I hand over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, as you know, this is my annual complaints and compliments and comments report about children's social services. As you know, that we have to have a complaints procedure in social services. This is a statutory function, and it's a requirement to produce an annual report of the complaints that we receive and that we've dealt with in the period from 1st of April to the 31st of March 15. So as I said, the report isn't just about complaints, it's about comments and compliments as well. As I've said to you previously, there are 2 stages to the social services complaints procedure. The first stage is where we try and sort out complaints at the local level. And then if people are not happy, they can go on to the next stage where there's a formal investigation and where independent investigators are appointed together with an independent person to carry out the investigation. And then if somebody is still not happy, they can go on to the Ombudsman. So for this period that we're talking about, we had 20 complaints and we had 11 comments and 21 compliments. So the positives are that we had the same amount of compliments as we had complaints. And we had one more comment this year than what we had last year. So, that's the positives about it. 16 complaints were dealt with at stage 1 and 4 complaints went to the formal investigation stage. 2 of those complaints are where the complainants wanted to directly go to the formal stage, and that is their right if that's what they wish to do. But all the time we do try and resolve complaints at stage 1 wherever possible. I've given you an example there of the comments that I've received for this period. So I've lifted those, from the information that we get from people who don't want to go necessarily through a formal process, but want to let us know that they may not be happy about something. So we'll then log it as a comment and follow up on it in the same way as we would follow up on informal complaints, in as much as I would log them, send them on to the relevant manager and ask the manager to respond to the comments that's made and go back to the individual with a response. And again then, with regard to the compliments, I've lifted out examples of compliments and, you know, directly what people have said. And, you know, if you've read those, you'll see there's some lovely compliments there about staff in children's social services and about staff in children's services. I've also put in a little bit more this time about complaints. You know, there's 16 complaints that we had at the local informal level. These are complaints. What I've put down there is actually what people are saying they're complaining about. So it may not necessarily be the case that that may not be accurate, but that is what they're complaining about. So we would look into that and reply accordingly. And then with the stage 2 complaints, I've given you some information there of the sort of things that people complained about at stage 2, and also, you know, whether they were upheld or not upheld or partially upheld. And with regard to the Ombudsman, we didn't have any complaints that went to the Ombudsman, or at least the Ombudsman has not contacted me to say that they've had any issues that they're going to look into. We don't get many complaints from young people themselves. It's usually from their relatives or carers. But there were 2 complaints from young people, and that one was about they wanted more contact with their siblings, and the other one was issues with the reparation sessions. So, but they were resolved at stage 1, which I'm pleased to say. So, as I said, you know, the complaints decreased. We've had 20 complaints this year for this period, but for 2013-14, there were 32 complaints, so they have gone down. I wouldn't say it's a good thing that complaints go down, because it's important that people feel that they can complain if they're not happy about things. But it's good to know that, you know, that they have decreased slightly. Number of stage 2s, there's just one up from last year, and we haven't got stage 3s any longer because the Welsh Government brought in a new complaints process from August last year. So there's just 2 stages, and then there's no 3rd stage any longer. With regard to the response timescales, up until the 31st of July last year, we had 10 working days to try and resolve complaints at stage 1. But from the 1st of August, the new process is, in effect, is 17 working days, because we have 2 working days to acknowledge the complaints, 10 working days to carry out the complaints investigation, and 5 days then to respond. A little bit more time. Where the complaints, where it's taken longer, is generally because they are a bit more complex, and therefore a bit more time is needed to carry out the investigation. The purpose of you know, people raising complaints is that we try and learn from them. So it's important that we always look at, you know, what people are saying and try and improve processes so that those complaints don't come up again. One of the recurring themes, though, with our complaints is about communication. So, you know, Tracy and I meet regularly on a monthly basis. We talk through the complaints Tracy raises it at her CSLT, Children's Services Leadership Team meetings, and to see how we can improve. And communication is on our agenda to try and improve the way that Children's Services communicate with its customers. After every formal investigation, we always prepare an action plan, and we go through what recommendations were made in the Stage 2 report and follow up on those actions, again, as another way of trying to learn from complaints and make sure that that they don't happen again. So that's sort of a brief overview of the complaints activity in Children's Social Services. 20 complaints is very, very low. Our neighbouring authorities have much more than that. So in some ways it's a good thing. Depends how you look at it, really. So.
Thank you very much, Annette. It's very interesting. Councillor Powell, did you want to ask a question?
Thank you very much. Yes, it is good to see that the complaints are down, as long as there aren't hidden ones. The only thing I was a bit worried about, the quality of reports. Are you concerned about the quality of the reports? Because if you look at point 5.1, the first bullet point says initial assessment report had very minimal contents and there were lots of spelling and punctuation errors in it. And I wondered if you were concerned about the quality of the reports.
These are the quality of reports in that this is the complaint that the complainant is making about the staff in Children's Social Services, not about the investigator's report. It's about, yes, so that's their complaint.
Didn't make it very clear.
Oh,
there,
right, okay, well,
yes.
yeah, sorry about that. But
So,
yes, it's
that's
where
not-
they've
yeah.
made the complaint about they feel that the social worker's report isn't clear.
Yes, because the way it was put there, it looked a bit as though it was their answers.
Right.
Councillor Foley.
Thank you, Annette, for another report. And we always have this kind of almost theological discussion about when does a comment become a complaint. And I'm not going to go there today, but it is, as always, clearly put. A couple of things, really. Looking at the Stage 2 complaints, they're not linked in any way, are they? They don't come from the same part of the service, or they're just almost random, if you like.
No, they're all separate. They're all separate complaints from different individuals.
Thank you. But what I meant was, do they concern the same part of the service? Maybe you're not the one to answer this, or are they across the board as well?
They are from different teams in Children's Social Services.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you very much. I think then the second question, if I could ask, obviously, when they do go to that second stage, they become more complex to handle, don't they? There's more effort involved. Have you got a rough idea between you of what the cost implications are of a Stage 2 complaint? Just trying to think of the impact on our budget, I suppose.
Yes, every complaint that goes to Stage 2 costs us money, because not only do we have to have an independent investigator, but we have to have an independent person as well to make sure the investigation is carried out in a fair and unbiased way. So I have a budget for £17,500 for complaints investigations. It's very difficult to forecast that budget because we never know when we're going to get a complaint, but, on average, a complaints investigation costs about £2,500.
Tracy, would you like to come in on that?
And also the other issue we have now is, since the changes to the complaints process, families can go straight to a Stage 2 without accessing Stage 1. We have a system in Children's Services now where one manager oversees all the Stage 1 investigations, because the changes has also meant that we have to actually meet the complainant as well. So there's a time and resource requirement on the service. But it's also that people can go straight to stage 2, and some have gone straight to stage 2 since the changes, instead of accessing stage 1, which is where we have historically made every effort, and you can see from the figures here today, to reduce as many complaints and answer as many complaints as possible. But obviously there's a risk of an increased cost because people can go straight to stage 2.
Right, so it isn't that they go to stage 2 is not necessarily any indication of, shall we say, the seriousness of the complaint. It's about the preferences of the complainer. Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much indeed.
Which is quite frightening, isn't it, considering the cost effect, the cost implications of that. So they have that choice to go straight there, the cost of 2,500 or whatever. Thank you. Just Annette, to carry on from Councillor Powell, I do see in that list, it does say poor quality of contact reports, but issues with social worker and quality of reports written about the family. So I think somewhere there are a few little complaints about the report. Is that a training issue, do you think?
What we're finding with some complainants, not in all cases, there's a couple of cases we've had where the report wasn't of a quality that we would expect from our social workers. But sometimes the complainants are saying that you have written inaccurate information about me, when in fact, when you look back through the assessment, it's information that has come from another party making a referral, so education or health colleagues, and we are required to cut and paste that information into the assessment format because that's not what we have said, that is what the referring agencies have said. So there may be, the family is arguing that the information is inaccurate, and they're arguing that the social worker has written incorrect information. The social worker has written an evidence-based report and assessment that the family often doesn't agree with. You know, we may be saying things about the levels of domestic violence within a family, about drug and alcohol use within a family, and parenting within a family. So sometimes we've had quite a number, I think, over the last couple of years around the report is inaccurate because it says that I come home drunk, those sorts of things. So it's that, as well as it's the family perception, as well as you know, is it accurate?
Thank you for that clarification. It's very useful. Are there any other questions? Oh, Mr. Robert Shaw.
Thank you. I do have some concerns, really, when you talk about comments and complaints. Because it seems to me, then, that if two identical complaints are made, one complainant doesn't want to make an official complaint and the other one does, one's recorded as a comment and one would be recorded as a complaint. I find that difficult to...
It's entirely up to the person how they wish that their comment, which we, as I say, we deal with as we still follow through with it, but it's entirely up to them whether they want it dealt with through a formal complaints process or whether they just want to tell us about it and for us to take some action about it. It's down to the individual, the person who's contacting us about it.
But there could be a disciplinary matter. For example, on one of the comments, you've got concerns about the conduct of a social worker.
As I said, we would still deal with that in the proper way. And if we find then that there are concerns, obviously I would speak to our personnel colleagues, Tracy and others, and follow through on those, which we do.
But you also said that I think you said it was £2,000 to actually follow up a complaint, whereas probably a comment.
That's for £2,000 for a formal when people go to stage 2. At stage 1, which is the local resolution stage, that's where we ask a team manager to investigate and try and resolve the complaint. Because at stage 1, the emphasis is on trying to resolve the complaints and find a resolution. It's when we get to stage 2 that the complaint costs us about £2,500.
Thank you for that, but I still do have some concerns about how these are recorded.
That to be noted. Do you want to speak? Do you want to say? Yes, I know. It's way no. All right. Thank you, Councillor Jones.
If I put in more narrative about the complaints and the comments, the report, I'd have to give you so much more information, and then we have to be careful that we're not identifying people as well. So it's sort of like a balance, giving you some information about the complaints and the comments without identifying people's complaints.
That was, just to clarify that point, no, we're not spending public money on tea and cakes for people. That was a session that the Children with Disabilities team invited people to, and we had finance and transport there, and we had families come to that so they could understand what we did as a service and what finance did and what transport did, just to clarify.
All right. Any other questions? Well, Annette, I'd like to thank you for your report. It's, again, clear and interesting, and it's very obvious that we have a caring and dedicated staff in children's services, social services, so we'd like to thank them. An area of concern, of course, from the reference is the poor reporting, which you have talked about and clarified, and the costs of stage 2 formal complaints. That really is a concern, that anybody can have the choice to go straight to that. But thank you for bringing this report to us again. Thank you. Right, last but not least, we have a late arrival, really, to the agenda, and we very kindly, but we didn't realise it'd be quite so bulky, I think, really, but we have Richard Austin, who's Principal Officer Inclusion, who's going to give a report on young people excluded from schools. Okay, by Jacqueline. And the purpose of this report is to make members aware of the progress in reducing exclusions from schools. As I say, Richard Austin is the Principal Officer Inclusion, and he will give us a report. Thank you, Richard.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks for agreeing for the item to come on at late notice. I just put the Welsh Government guidance in there for your reference. I didn't expect you to read it. It's my Bible, and you know, I take it with me everywhere I go, to be honest with you, and it has its uses. When you're talking about sort of behaviour and exclusions, it gets the audience's attention, especially when you talk about it in schools anyway. Before I start, it's difficult to compare exclusion rates amongst local authorities because local authorities have different types of provision and different intervention strategies. So Welsh Government guidance says to take the benchmarking data with a pinch of salt. Okay. So where shall I start? I'll start with about our sort of ethos and how we try to work with schools. Our ethos in Monmouthshire is to try to maintain young people in schools wherever possible. If we have to move pupils from schools in secondary, that would involve transport, additional costs, and uprooting. So we try to keep young people in schools, and to that extent the pupil referral service works proactively and tries to maintain young people within their existing provision. We work extensively with other agencies because pupils' behaviour doesn't happen in a vacuum. There are often other reasons why they're misbehaving. We work very, very closely with colleagues in social services, Jacqueline in the Youth Offending Service, Youth Services, Community and Housing Services, to put together support packages to keep young people in schools. Over the last 4 years, I think we've only had 3 pupils who've been permanently excluded from Monmouthshire schools. I think that's correct. Look at my data. Yeah, over the last 4 years is 3 pupils. And they have been as a result of parents or pupils exercising their right of appeal. We all want to keep permanent exclusions low, but there are times when parents and pupils want to appeal, and that's right. And it's the only occasion, if the decision is upheld by a governing body, that means that a child cannot return to a school. So if there is particular incidents regarding health and safety, as there was in one incident, the only way that it could be determined that child wouldn't go back to that school is by implementing a permanent exclusion. So we compare very, very well with similar authorities on permanent exclusion in that regard. In terms of fixed term exclusions, I think the picture at the last inspection, in terms of primary fixed term exclusions, wasn't great. It fell that year in 2011-12 to 137 days. And the then Chief Officer came to Cabinet, I think it was July the 18th, 2012. I remember the date because it was my father's birthday. I'm not that well informed. And Cabinet kindly agreed to fund an additional £100,000 for us to support primary school pupils. If you look at the table on 2.1, you will see that the number of primary days lost to fixed-term exclusion has fallen quite significantly from 137 in 11-12 to 41 in 2014-15. Still too high. We would like that to fall further. The caveat that I put with that is that we don't have any specialist behaviour provision in Monmouthshire at Key Stage 2, and sometimes when we have young people that present with real challenge in behaviour, schools find that a struggle, and that is something that we are looking at, as you'll be aware of, in the ALM review. The number of secondary days lost to fixed-term exclusions continued to fall since 11-12. It went down to, you see the figure in 2013-14, it fell considerably there. There was a slight upturn last year, and our analysis puts it down to 2 schools where they restructured internal systems in the school. So the local authority has met with both head teachers, and and the local authority has met with both head teachers, and we've reinstated a provision in one of the schools. So we're looking at monitoring that very, very carefully. At the start of each school year, I have conversations with head teachers about the level of exclusions, and look at how we're reducing that. They're difficult conversations to have, but we can have them because we've developed those effective relationships. We also support our vulnerable pupils, so we track all those in terms of additional learning needs. Do people want to ask me questions? Shall I stop? Or have you got questions on this?
All it is, Richard, is all the questions that the chair has drafted to ask you today, you actually answer. Sorry.
Sorry, I can feel my antenna, I can feel the whispers. No, I haven't been peeping, Chair, honest. I tell you what, I'll stop and you just ask me some questions.
Really? No. It's just interesting. Can I just... You said about the 2 schools, secondary schools, and the exclusion rates were attributed to the restructuring of internal provisions and symptoms. What does that mean, please? Could you just explain?
Yeah, I will explain. We've gone into jargon. One of our schools in 13-14 had an additional needs unit, and in 12-13 had an additional needs unit, and in 13-14 made the decision to restructure that so that pupils were distributed throughout the school. So some pupils that were in small classes, then all of a sudden went into classes of 30. So the school have taken the decision to reverse that. Okay.
So do you want to take questions now, or do you want
I'll take the questions, I think, yeah. I'm just going to say, what I've tried to show in the report is that we follow this in detail for sort of vulnerable groups, for pupils with additional needs, our looked after children, our ethnic minority children. We track them religiously and rigorously. One piece of data that I think is really significant is that Monmouthshire looked after children. There was 70 days fixed term exclusion last year. Of those 70 days, one of those was from a Monmouthshire school. The other 69 was where looked after children were placed elsewhere. So I think it shows how well we support our looked after children. We also challenge other schools where they are likely to exclude or have excluded Monmouthshire pupils where they attend neighbouring schools. I was successful last year in a governing body disciplinary meeting whereby the governing body overturned the head teacher's decision to exclude a Monmouthshire child from a school. So I wasn't the most popular person in that meeting, but that's my role. It's there to advocate for our young people and make sure that processes are followed appropriately.
Any questions? Right. Mr. Farley.
Hiya. Can I go straight up to 1.2 on your report?
Yes.
So using the latest data, it ranks Monmouth second out of 5.
Yeah.
Second
Similar.
what? Second highest, second
Sorry.
worst, second
Okay.
awful, similar, who are they, what
Okay.
are they?
Yeah, similar local authorities. We're talking Ceredigion, Pembrokeshire, the Vale of Glamorgan, and there's one other that always escapes me. It will come there now. No, it's not Rhondda Cynon Taf. Pembrokeshire, Vale of Glamorgan, Powys. Thanks, Sarah. Powys. Those are the 5 that we benchmark ourselves against. And second is we were second best. So I'd like to have no permanent exclusions, but this is when where a parent wanted to exercise their right of appeal. The local authority had identified specialist provision. It was there ready for the child, but the parents wanted the child to maintain in this, to remain in the school. Okay.
Thank you. Councillor Powell.
Yes, thank you. Looking down further on to the next sort of part of it, in page 222, 2.4, we're talking about the different exclusions. Obviously, children that are excluded from schools a lot are not going to have had quite as good an education as those that have been in school all the time. And I wonder, do you work alongside the youth service to reduce the number of NEETs when the children are after this, these excluded children are not in school anyway then?
Yes, we do. The easiest answer to that is yes, we do. Hannah Jones from the Youth Service sits on the admission panel of the Pupil Referral Service, and I sit on the Youth Offer Group as well. I met with Hannah this week with Bev Randall, who coordinates our Pupil Referral Service, with the Youth Service new Inspire to Achieve programme. So we're looking at coordinating our intervention there. So we're making sure that we don't duplicate our resources in terms of young people that we're targeting. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Good. That's a very positive view, isn't it? Councillor Farley.
Thank you, Richard, for this report. I don't necessarily expect you to answer my question today, but possibly to bear the point behind it in mind for future reports. This is very much about recording process, recording what happens, but it doesn't actually give us a sense of why or how come.
Okay.
And I know it's difficult because just as we were talking about the social services complaints, for example, earlier, there is a point at which you wouldn't want to take the risk of identifying a particular child. But I wonder if somehow we could have a sense in future of the kinds of things that are leading to, for example, have we got numbers of kids running around a classroom with machetes, or are these things something to do with behaviour towards other pupils or towards teachers or whatever? Do you see what I mean? I just want to get that bit of a feeling of the child behind the case.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a very valid point. We do run reports by reasons. When schools are submitting exclusions forms, they have to signify to the local authority for what is the reason. So there are a series of 8 categories. I think it's 8 that they can exclude for. By far the most prevalent is persistent disruptive behaviour within our schools, which is low-level behaviour. There is then sort of verbal abuse to staff, physical assault on other pupils. I can take that on board, and at the next report we will include that because I can give the overall percentages and number of days, and it wouldn't identify young people.
Thank you for taking the point, Richard. I mean, I'm asking about this. I don't know whether other members would agree, but it would be helpful if you could do that.
Yeah. Yeah, we have the data available, so that's it.
Thank you, Richard. Councillor Jones. Councillor Guppy.
I think just alluded to the reasons of disruptive behaviour. That undermines the teaching and learning in any classroom. Can you reassure us that the people on their return to school will have some sanction, some activity to make sure that that disruption doesn't continue, so that as well as championing the excluded, but also supporting the other population in the class?
Yeah, Councillor Jones, the onus obviously will be on the head teacher to have a conversation with the young person when they returns to school. Some schools have a policy whereby there is a meeting whenever a young person has been excluded, so that that conversation is had. One of our schools has developed restorative practice, and they don't exclude very often at all. So those conversations go on as a matter of routine. I'm particularly pleased to say that that practice has been extended into another one of our schools, which has had higher rates of exclusion in the past few years, and they are looking at developing that practice as well.
Thank you. Do you offer continued support to a child that has gone back post-exclusion or not?
It depends on the individual exclusion and the length of it, Councillor. The Pupil Referral Service will work really closely with schools to try and avoid that, and I think we tend to work with the young people where schools are right at the end of the tether, where they feel that they've got no more latitude or no more room to support that young child in coming back into the mainstream environment. But we do work with some pupils in school. I think it just depends on the case, and it depends upon our capacity.
Thank you. Councillor Guppy.
Yes, you said when comparing other schools, the Welsh Government says take it with a pinch of salt. But everybody wants to know what we are compared to other local authorities. And my question would be, if you're comparing rates per 1,000 pupils, would that not be the same in all the authorities, or for some reason it's looked at different?
No, the rate per 1,000 would be the same, but what would be different would be the intervention programs and support available to various schools and various authorities. Some authorities have huge numbers of support services. Like Rhondda Cynnon Taff, they've got vast numbers of PRUs and pupil referral units. And very often young people don't get permanently excluded from schools there. They get moved into a PRU. I've got a view on that because it's depriving them of a right to appeal against those decisions. But they say that's why they say take it with a pinch of salt, is because of the variation in support that's available.
In which case, do they categorise us out of compared to the other 22 authorities?
You can look at it in terms of rates per 1,000. It is there. So what I've done is chosen to benchmark against our statistical neighbours, which is what Estin will be asking us the week after next.
So where do we sit then in the
I think
overall? Not compared to our local authorities.
Overall, we in terms of permanent exclusions, we're one of the best over the last 3 years because we've only had one. In terms of primary, they then look at it in terms of 5 days or more, or 6 days, or 5 days or less, or 6 days or more. So there are some variations there in that. I'll get that data and come back to you. I haven't got that in there. Okay.
It doesn't matter that you haven't got the data now, but can you give a comment of what you think we are, or is that? You don't have to ask them that. So
no, I think we have improved since 11-12. I think there's further improvement still to be made. That's my honest answer. Yeah.
Fine, that's fine, and that's what we would want really as an improvement. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Guppy. Ms. Fowler.
Hi. Just bringing attention to 4.1, the exclusions amongst free school meals. Obviously, that's a great concern as the national third target is closing the gap for SFM children. And then I look at your table and see an upward trajectory in that 10% in 12-13, then 33%, and then 37.9, is that continuing, and how are we going to close the gap for those children if they're excluded?
I think that's a very good question, and I think they're the conversations we're having with schools, trying to enhance their capacities to sort of maintain not just pupils with free school meals, but all pupils, to enhance their capacities to keep all pupils. And if you look at the upward trajectory, the number of days lost at secondary, it has increased, but allied to that, the number of days lost overall has come down. So I guess what this really shows to me is that as a percentage that the pupils with free school meals are excluded more now than previously. So that's why it's been useful to undertake this analysis, and conversations this will be shared with head teachers at appropriate conferences. Yeah.
Thank you. I wonder if you could say that individual pupil tracking is helping the situation now. Do you think that it can be potential trouble can be picked up at an earlier stage?
Yes, I think it'd be fair to say that those of us that have worked in this field for a long time can go into schools and identify which young people are likely to be presenting with problems for the schools. I had a conversation with my chief officer the other day, and went into a school and said there are likely to be some pupils there. What's alarming for me is that in terms of primary schools, is that the pupils that presented with challenging behaviour are getting younger, and it's more foundation phase now in very early years rather than older pupils.
Thank you. But as a result of that, I suppose you could say that intervention could be made. There could be earlier intervention.
Yeah. Yeah, we have we've got all our vulnerable pupils tracked. Those who are at risk of being persistent absentees, our sort of ethnic minority pupils, gypsy traveller pupils. So we're tracking their attendance and their exclusions as well. I take reports on a monthly basis on all the cohorts in relation to exclusion, and because we're a small authority, I tend to know about problems pretty quickly. And if I don't hear about it, I have an email. So we try and be as proactive as we can, which is why we're making full use of that additional sum of money that was released in 2012 to maintain young people and get involved in the primary key stages.
Thank you very much. Mr. Guppy.
Yeah, so just one further. In view of preventative work, would you say that this authority is well equipped in view of the training for our teachers? You've highlighted that we're seeing a lot more disruption within our younger children. Is this being addressed in view of further training in support of the teachers, in view of anticipating problems and understanding the problems, in view of if you can understand what the reasons behind the behaviour, you can put more in preventatively. Are we addressing this within our schools in view of the earlier age being highlighted?
One of the things that we're undertaking at the moment, some of the things that we've undertaken is whole school training on behaviour with all our staff. We've also implemented SEAL, social emotional approaches to learning. That's now embedded in all our schools. We did all that training about 3 or 4 years ago, and that's enhanced their capacities. The next round of training that we're putting in place is attachment training, because that's a big issue within not just Monmouthshire. I think any local authority at the moment, with the numbers of looked after children that we've got, and those children that are special subject of special guardianship or adopted. And we're also undertaking the ELSA training, emotional literacy for support assistance. So there's a programme that's currently starting in the spring term, looking at that.
Thank you. Any other questions? Then I'd just like to thank you, Richard, for bringing this report to us. Very interesting, and one that we will look forward to receiving annually from now on. And to look forward to reviewing the progress made to reduce the number of exclusions further. And please take on board the request that additional material regarding the reasons for exclusion is added, and really any other kind of detail without revealing the case themselves. But thank you very much.
Thanks ever so much.
Okay, thank you. Well, that's the last major agenda item, but we have the work sheets now, the work programme forward work programme sheets to go through, if we could just go through quickly. And I think that I think we've already added today, in fact, the youth offenders recovery plan outcomes, so perhaps we'd like to see that within the next 6 to 9 months. And another one I had was ICT in schools. I think perhaps we ought to review that as soon as possible, because we don't know where we are at the moment, do we? I think we kind of reached a plateau and we don't know what's going on. Was there something else? Councillor Farley.
Yes, I'm sorry that Chief Officer of Young People has just left, because I was going to congratulate her. Always a pleasure to see Sarah's photograph in publicity, and I was very pleased to see that Monmouth School won the National Healthy Schools Award the other day. I think it was Monmouth School. A scheme of which I have some knowledge and can claim some considerable responsibility. So it does occur to me that that is an item that at some point this committee might like to hear about. There's some fantastic work being done in schools, and the Healthy Schools scheme is one of them. But very closely allied to that is a different kind of trigger for a suggestion of something we might consider. As a governor on Monday night, I think it was, I went to a cluster meeting of governors in Chepstow, where we had an excellent presentation from Emma Taylor, our Healthy Schools officer, as it turns out, about the sex and relationships education programme, which some of our schools are beginning to take up. An incredible programme, which, in my view, brings together the fruits of something like 40 years of experience and shows the journey from when health education was just possibly, at best, with all due respect, a nurse talking about feet, nits and the dirty bits in between, or the naughty bits in between, to an elaborate, structured, sophisticated, evaluated, cross-curricular programme. It is being done in schools in our name, in effect, as a local authority, and I just thought it was an area that members might be interested in. It's just a suggestion from me. I bring those two, and they could easily be linked together for your thoughts. Thank you, Chair.
Yes, Richard, would you like to say something?
I'm just going to say Emma works in one of my teams and services, and she does some outstanding work on the Healthy Schools agenda, and I'm sure that she'd be delighted to come and report on the work that's been undertaken in schools.
Thank you very much. So, Hazel, will you be able to do that?
Yep. I've added those items to your work programme, Chair, just to advise members that the next meeting of this committee will be a joint meeting with Adult Select Committee, and it will be on the 15th, won't it, of December. This meeting is a special meeting which has been put in the diary to look at some sort of overarching scrutiny for both committees. It will be an afternoon meeting, so if both committees could meet here, please, at 1:30 for a 2 o'clock start. And the focus of the meeting really is partnership scrutiny around sort of families, poverty, the Family First programme and other sort of programmes that are there to support families under the joint assessment framework. The meeting was actually designed to do that, to look at this partnership scrutiny, but we did have a request quite late in the day that the CSSIW would like to come and present the performance report of children's and adult social services. As you know, we don't have lots of joint meetings, but given that we had one scheduled for the 15th of December, we thought it would be a good idea to put that on that agenda, and then we can meet as one committee, which helps really CSSIW and also your time and availability. So those are the items that will be on that meeting, and it'll be the 15th of December in the afternoon at 2 o'clock.
Thank you, Hazel. If there are no other concerns or issues, then I'd like to thank you all for coming, and thank you, Nicola, thank you, Hazel. Sarah, sorry. So, see, it is time to close now. I do know it's Sarah. And thank you, Hazel, and thank you all for coming. The meeting's now closed. Thank you.